Hello. So this video is not in relation to or in continuation to any of my previous videos. I just thought of randomly talking about to you, maybe to myself, about neuroplasticity and what is neuroplasticity's connection with Bhagavad Gita, or what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. There is no direct link if you would look at it like that, but then there is convergence. There is a very direct association. In fact, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says something which in effect is neuroplasticity, but the word, of course, is not being used. So neuroplasticity is basically well, if you look it up online, there are different kinds of definition of neural pathways and related to genetics, etc., etc., etc. But what I understand in very simple layman language is that neuroplasticity is basically a map of your mind which is being reconstructed. So just that the wiring is done in a very different way. Perhaps it's like a rewiring of your brain. And how the rewiring happens is that whenever there is a particular stimulus or there's a particular event or a particular thing which we experience, our self, it could be our mind or our ego or just us as humans, we obviously have reaction to every action. So neuroplasticity is just about how we can just take a few seconds pause and think of of the reaction, not as something which is impulsive or just very spontaneous or just like a reflex action, but something like reacting with awareness. So if I were to give an example of that, would be that perhaps you have a relative, a sibling, or maybe you have a colleague who say really nasty things and they really trigger you, like make you really angry. So if you want to do it like a social experiment, although it takes a lot of time for your brain to keep repeating those experiments and then do all the rewiring, because it just in one go it will not happen. But eventually you'll start noticing that your mind is getting calm. So the next time someone triggers you, says something really mean to you, says something really nasty, so instead of just quickly reacting and lashing out at them just because they're lashing out at us, so we just want to give it back to them. And there are certain things which are hurt our self-esteem, self-respect and things like that, and we just don't want to allow that person to cross that boundary. It's very natural to us that aggression comes out whenever we see aggression. We just respond to it like that because it's a way of creating our boundary. So it's not wrong, but if you look at it like this, how you have to rewire your brain. So our brain reacts in a typical way that whenever someone is triggering us, we just react by being angry or by crying or just shutting them away, or some kind of reaction. Definitely not silence. I mean, hardly there is a silence. So if you have to practice neuroplasticity, or if you have to explore that path, what happens is that the moment that action appears or those words are uttered, you just take 5 to 10 seconds pause and then just kind of be in the moment. Maybe if you want, you can count till 10 or just take few deep breaths. Trust me, it's like that. I mean, it may sound a little dramatic, but that's exactly what has to be done. And then after 10 seconds, when you're reacting to that sibling or that boss of yours, then if you give that 10 seconds break, that pause, that's like a circuit which breaks. So now when you're giving the response, or now when you're reacting to that particular thing, that behavior or that statement or whatever that you have experienced, now you're reacting with awareness, not just by what your brain just spontaneously and by its own virtue of its own programming it does. No. Then what happens is that your response is more like from a point of view, from a point of awareness, like you've kind of thought about it, like marinated in it a few seconds, and then yeah, or maybe you will just shout back only, and maybe that's something which will happen. But the idea is, now where this is where Bhagavad Gita comes. The idea is that you have to keep repeating the pattern. You have to keep repeating the pattern. All those in fields, when people walk from a particular field in villages, so when that path is walked by many people, so like a pathway is created. In Hindi we call it pagdandi. So that is created, and then the people also keep walking from that path because it's clear in the field. So something similar happens with your brain. When you keep doing this repeatedly, then your brain starts getting trained, and then eventually this becomes your default state. You start reacting from a state of awareness and not just like an animal reacting instantly. So our reactions are basically, I'm not saying that I'm against our reactions and why are they like that and why should you not do something like that immediately responding or reacting. It's because our mind is pretty much like a monkey mind. It has it keeps thinking of different things, sometimes illogical things. Sometimes our conditioning is the reason why we react in a particular way, and something to do with how humans have evolved over generation, their survival instinct, blah blah blah. So these pathways are formed by default. So neuroplasticity is basically giving that circuit break, giving that pause, so your new pathways or your new those roads, lanes in the fields are made. So, and then I don't need to tell you why that helps you in future, because it makes you take your course of life or take your life decisions or your thought processes more from an awareness point of view. Like you take decisions, you think from a more of an awareness, presence kind of stance. You're just not by default reacting like a robot. So yeah, that's how it helps you. And now how Bhagavad Gita intersects with like there's a convergence of both these topics is why, because I'm not a Bhagavad Gita expert, so I can't tell you the exact verse or chapter or anything. But Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says that when you react to things from a point of view of like detachment or vairagya. So vairagya doesn't necessarily mean leaving people or things like that. So Bhagavad Gita says that when you react from a point of detachment, that's the best state to be. That's the best state ever. Now what detachment means here is that when a particular episode happens, now let's come back to that irritating sibling of yours. The moment your sibling or your boss or whoever it is triggers you, now there's a particular way you will react by default. Now what Bhagavad Gita says is that detach to that particular reaction. Just zoom out of your brain by giving it a pause of few seconds. That way you have zoomed out and you are watching your own brain trying to react from a default state. So what Bhagavad Gita says is that you need to practice that detachment, and that's how you will be able to that will be your best reaction ever. Then there are certain things with Bhagavad Gita talks about nishkam karma and things like that, but that's too complicated a topic to get into. But this is the exact thing which is written in Bhagavad Gita, that you react to things from a point of detachment, and that's how, when you keep doing it on a daily basis, when you keep repeating this experiment, that's how your brain gets trained to be in a certain way. And then in the long term, that is the best way to be. When you stop reacting from those particular default reactions, now your mind gets in a more calmer state. Because of course immediately it will not happen. When you keep repeating this and your brain starts getting trained, now you're reacting to life situations, or that algorithm of your life gets synced up, if for lack of a better word. It's more in sync, because now you have sort of like deprogrammed your brain, of course with practice, because now you are just not doing whatever your brain does by default. Now you are reacting from a point of awareness. And Bhagavad Gita says that that's the best way to be, not just doing what everyone does and reacting in a certain way by anger, hatred. Instead of that, just detach from that thought, that anger which is arising in that split second. Let it float. Just be with it for a few seconds and then react. And then first time it may not work. First time it could be like you did try it, but then 2 hours later you remember about what happened, and now you're angry again. But when you keep practicing it, then over and over and over, I don't know, months, years, I have no idea, because I myself just started trying it. But it does give your mind a calm state, and this state is exactly what Bhagavad Gita talks about, that to reach it, you have to practice this non-resistance. And when you have to, when something happens, you just try to react in a certain way. It could be anger or trying to change that reaction because you're not ready to accept it, right? That's why your body just reacts and disapproves it. But eventually that transcends into non-resistance, and that's the best way to surrender. And actually that's the way. When you have to, if you want to reach that state of shunyata, zero, that'll only be when you eventually stop reacting from the default state of your mind, and slowly that awareness starts seeping in. So yeah, this is how neuroplasticity has a certain sort of convergence with Bhagavad Gita. I was actually looking up the verses also, and I don't remember them, but I have noted them somewhere. If you really found this interesting, and if you want to dig deeper, tell me also if you want. If you want to dig deeper, I'll share those verses which kind of like touch upon neuroplasticity, those verses from Bhagavad Gita. I'll drop them down in the description or the comment section. Thank you.